Hello, everyone. I want to take this opportunity to kind of show you another application for arrays. Okay. During the next couple of weeks, you're going to be given a lot of opportunities to actually see different applications for arrays. Back in my day when I started programming, we used arrays just about for everything. And that was because memory was not as cheap and as large as it is today, where you're getting computers with 8 gig of memory. We used to have computers with 16K of memory, but that we shared. So yes, I'm old as dirt. But with that said, we did use arrays quite a bit. We actually load stuff into our program so we could actually process it. We're kind of doing the same thing here. In today's world, we don't use arrays as much for that kind of stuff, loading data in and processing it, because we have databases. And so we're going to be the speed in which you can go back and forth to a database is much greater than it used to be several years ago, or really 20 years ago or 30 years ago. I guess that is several years ago for many of you, probably a lifetime. With that said, though, there's still many applications for an array or even the idea of an array in your programs. So what I want you to capture over the next couple of weeks is, kind of see some of these ideas. But I think also what's going to happen over these next couple of weeks is that you're also going to be able to improve on your logic and your problem solving. I want you to look at things differently and try to figure out ways to write code that might be a little bit more, what do you want to say, speedy or unique, or where you could do things in less code by using an array and going that way. All right. So as we get into this, just keep playing with it. And again, that's kind of what these weeks are about. In this particular problem, I wanted to show you this another application, and it's kind of unique and similar to something that you're probably going to be playing with here soon in your own assignments. But this one's going to capture a weekday project. So this is a weekday project, and what we're going to do is we're going to capture the hours of the week that you actually worked. And then we're going to display some statistics. And so let me go kind of show you what we're doing here. And so what we're doing in this particular case is we're going to get our data. And once again, we're going to utilize an input box to do this. So if you had not listened to the video prior to this about input boxes and you're unfamiliar with input boxes, make sure you please listen to that video. It's going to help you a lot, and I'm going to assume you already have as we walk into this video. So we're going to capture some data and say we're working 8 hours a day, maybe we work 10 hours this day, 6 hours that day, 5 hours this day, and go from this. And then we're going to take off Sunday. And so I actually collected this data. What do you think I collected it in? And the answer is an array. Okay, and so I could have collected it in, 7 different variables, but in this case, it's a little bit easier to do it this way. Why, you say? Really because of the processing of it. Because what we're going to be able to do is when we display, we're going to display some statistics. And we're going to loop through that array very, very quickly to determine the total hours worked, the average hours, the maximum daily hours, and the minimum daily hours that we actually worked throughout this week. You might be going, well, couldn't you just do a bunch of if conditions? Of course we could. Okay, we could definitely do that. But with 7 things like this, as those if conditions can get long. So dealing with an array, instead of 7 different variables, we can just do an array that has 7 different instances or elements within it. And that's what we did here. Okay, let's go look at, I did a clear, I kind of did some fancy stuff in here. You can kind of look at the code. It'll be attached to this video. So what did we do here? Well, the first thing we did was load data. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back a little bit. We created an array. And of course it has int hours 6, which means there's 7 elements, 7 instances, occurrences, whatever you want to say, different variables within this array. It's called int hours. I did some other class level variables to hold the day and so on, and you'll see how that works. On the button submit, I just called load hours. And then what we did is I have a loop within a loop, and I'm going to loop through 7 days here. I'm actually going to loop through the array, which is now empty, okay? And I'm doing that to the length -1. Remember, this is the length of the array, how many occurrences are in there, -1. We're going to start at 0 because everything's 0 based, and we're going to loop through it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get our str input day. I'm going to call a function to do that. And I'm passing it down. I'm passing down the index. See that index we have, int index 0? And I'm going to pass that down. And I'm going to say, well, if it's a 0, pass back Monday. And that's how that works. So watch out. So my input box now states, please enter hours work for Monday. Okay? I have that loop here that we did in the previous video when I introduced input boxes that basically is going to keep looping until you give me good data. And once you give me good data, I'm going to move it into the array. Does that make sense? Okay. Take a good hard look at this as you know, again, after this video, and make sure you completely understand what we're doing. So we're getting our input box, and based upon it, as long as it's an integer, we're going to put it into my array. All right. Again, we explained this approach in the input box video of this week. Okay. If it's not, we're going to say message box, please enter numbers only. Once we get a good one, we'll loop back up and we'll go back and we'll increment our index and we'll go get Tuesday's data. See how that works? So it's kind of a unique way of collecting. It's kind of a unique way of storing and everything else. You know, kind of an odd way of using an array. But I hope it makes sense. What's cool about it is once we press the button display, we're going to get the total. How do we get the total? We loop through the array, okay? int 0 to 6. Again, instead of hard coding the 6 here, what I would probably do is I would do the array. So int hours, there it is, dot length -1. I like doing that all the time, just in case I want to change the length of my array. And now in this case, it's always going to be 7, so you don't have to, but I would get used to that because what we're going to do is go deal with some dynamic arrays a little bit later on, and you're never going to know what the length's going to be, and you'll see what I'm talking about probably next week or so, okay? Same thing here, I probably would incorporate that length -1 instead of just hard coding 6. Either way is fine in this particular case. Okay, and what we did here is to get the maximum hours. So I looped through the array, I set one as the maximum, I kept comparing each one as it went through and went from there. Kind of similar to what we did with the cookies example for our first example for the arrays. Okay, and we did the exact same thing to determine the least day as we went there. Okay, we looped until we, and we compared to figure out what's the day that had the least amount of hours. Same type of thing as the greater than, just the opposite. But, this is a kind of a cool way of writing it. If I didn't have this and I had 7 different variables, right, I would have to compare them all. Variable 1 to variable 2, variable 2 to variable, and a bunch of big, long if statements. But now we can have this loop. And though it may not be as impactful when we only have 7 variables, if we had 100 variables and we're comparing, you can see the difference, right? And again, I think that kind of shows itself with the cookies example we did before. Finally, what I did is the average. I just kind of went and got my total and divided it by the length. Isn't that cool? Because I know how many are in there. So I went and got get total, which I already had, that looped through and got the total for me. And then I basically took that int average, and I should be really int total, sorry about that, and int hours divided by length, and I'm sorry, divided by the actual length, and that returned my average. And so kind of, I know kind of quick, I know, but I don't want to go through each step here. I think you need to really go look at this yourself and go pull this program down and really analyze it to see how this is actually working. Once again, recognize how we're loading the array and then how we're processing the array. Okay, and so we're doing quite a few things here, and you kind of get the idea. All right, and that's what we're doing. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Take a good look at it, and I think this will help you with your assignments, at least your initial assignments and your first try at arrays, and see where how you fare. Okay.